Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 wide receivers that are being drafted after round 4 that have top 10 wide receiver upside in 2023 fantasy football. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get on into 5 wide receivers that are being taken after round 4 with top 10 upside in 2023 fantasy football. We begin with Chris Godwin, wide receiver of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, currently being taken as the wide receiver 29 at pick 55.7 on Underdog Fantasy. Last year, he finished the season as the wide receiver number 20 in half PPR, as well as the wide receiver 20 in half PPR points per game, tied with Denver Broncos wide receiver Jerry Jeudy. He played in 15 games last year, meaning he missed 2 games, putting up 142 targets, 9.5 per game, number 10 at wide receiver, 104 receptions, 6.9 per game. Very nice. I like. My name is Borat, number 6 at wide receiver, and 1,023 receiving yards, 68.2 per game, number 20. Now, his biggest downfall of last season was the touchdown category, as he only scored 3 total touchdowns last season, ranking 50th at wide receiver. In terms of efficiency, despite a down season compared to what most who drafted Chris Godwin assumed he would put up in 2022, he had 256 total route wins, 5th at wide receiver, 45.8% route win rate, 20th, 42.1% win rate versus man, 15th, 55.6% contested catch rate, 14th, and he had only a 5.13 target quality rating, 71st at wide receiver. We all know that last year Tom Brady, like Humpty Dumpty, took a fall, right? That was not the Tom Brady that we have seen throughout his career. Now, was Tom Brady bottom of the barrel, complete and utter dog shit every single game? No, but it was very clear that he lost some sort of an edge, and that is definitely why he retired, in my opinion. But despite Chris Godwin not getting the most accurate passes, despite Tom Brady clearly being much worse prior to the last couple of seasons, Chris Godwin still finished as a top 20 wide receiver in fantasy football, and now he is being disrespected as the wide receiver 29 off of the board. It doesn't make sense. Now, I get it. Nick, he's going from the GOAT, Tom Brady, to Baker Mayfield, right? I understand that Tom Brady, Baker Mayfield, just complete opposites of the spectrum, right? Tom Brady, the best quarterback of all time, the GOAT, and then you got Baker Mayfield, who most would consider a bust in the NFL. But the thing is, Tom Brady wasn't even great last year. Again, 5.13 target quality rating for Chris Godwin. So, while Baker Mayfield isn't the second coming of Patrick Mahomes or something out there, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to get the ball to Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin is an immensely talented player. This is a team that's defense isn't necessarily the best either, and they're going to be down big in games. And what you do when you're down bad in games, unless you're the fucking Atlanta Falcons who just run when they're getting pounded by 14 in the 4th quarter, what the Bucs are going to do is throw the ball. And Chris Godwin is the number 1B receiver on this offense. Chris Godwin is the 1B to Mike Evans 1A. Mike Evans was a guy that I considered putting in this video, but I already talked about him a couple of videos ago as someone who I really like at the wide receiver position. So Chris Godwin, I think even despite all of this hoopla going around about Baker Mayfield, I still genuinely believe the skill set of Chris Godwin alone gives him top 10 upside in 2023 fantasy football. Moving now to the number 2 wide receiver, we got Michael Pittman Jr. of the Indianapolis Colts, current underdog ADP wide receiver 31 at pick 61.6. Now, I have hyped up Michael Pittman Jr. in the past this season. This offseason already, I've talked about him a couple times. His ADP was wide receiver 28, 27, just around a month and a half ago when I talked about him, and his ADP continues to have a free fall. wide receiver, 23.5 PPR last year and 29.5 PPR points per game with the corpse of Matt Ryan. It was a weekend at Bernie's scenario. He was like a marionette, right? That was not the Matt Ryan that we've seen throughout his career. That is not even the Matt Ryan that choked the 28-3 lead to the Patriots, right? That Matt Ryan was terrible. And then they went to Sam Ehlinger. They fired Frank Reich. They bring in a center from their seasons past to be the head coach, right? Everything went wrong. But now, Michael Pittman goes from having played with these garbage can quarterbacks like Carson Wentz in the past to now getting Anthony Richardson. Now, I understand that Anthony Richardson, there's a lot of talk about him not being the guy, not being this, not being that, not a great passer. This guy's a running back, right? The same shit you hear about Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, those type of quarterbacks, you're hearing about Anthony Richardson. But again, Matt Ryan, Sam Ehlinger were so bad last season that even if the greatest doubters, the haters of Anthony Richardson are correct, it's probably still a step up from what we saw last season. And they also bring in a new head coach who was a great quarterback whisperer with Jalen Hurts, Shane Steichen in Philadelphia. So you get a new quarterback in there with a head coach that, kind of should be able to work with a quarterback like Anthony Richardson. I'm not saying Anthony Richardson is Jalen Hurts, but I hope you get the point, right? There's these quarterbacks that have great rushing upside. Michael Pittman was a target hog, a volume monster in 2022. He played in 16 games, having 141 targets, 8.8 per game, number 11 at wide receiver. So in 16 games, he was top 12 in targets. He is top 12 in receptions as well. 99 receptions, 6.2 per game, number 8 at wide receiver. 925 receiving yards, 57.8 per game, number 24, and 4 total touchdowns, 37th. How in the world do you get 141 targets, you get almost 100 receptions, but you don't get 1,000 receiving yards? You don't even score 5 touchdowns. How likely is that to happen, you think, in 2023? Now, I understand that the offensive line didn't get a severe upgrade, but they played at just as bad as it could get last year, right? The whole team fell off the edge of the earth, Christopher Columbus style, right? Columbus believed if you sailed the ocean blue, you went too far, you're falling off the edge of the earth, right? The Indianapolis O-line was terrible. Jonathan Taylor gets hurt. Matt Ryan looks like Stevie Wonder out there trying to read a defense. But now Anthony Richardson is in, and it's not just the fact that Michael Pittman is a target monster, which I think he's going to be again this season in 2023, because sure, they draft downs, sure, they have Alec Pierce, but outside of Michael Pittman, they don't really have another guy that could be a true alpha, a guy that can command 140 plus targets in any given season. That plus the fact that this guy was uber efficient. 297 total route wins, second at wide receiver, 50.3% route win rate, 7th, and a 52.2% contested catch rate, 17th. So as long as Anthony Richardson is not awful, I think Michael Pittman has the upside to be top 10. He's going to see the volume. He's an efficient route runner. He is going to get open. You just need someone to throw him the ball who can actually see correctly. And Anthony Richardson, pretty sure he's got that 20/20 vision before we move on into the number 3 wide receiver taken after round 4 top 10 upside. I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. We've talked about them a couple of times in today's video. Now, if you are new to Underdog Fantasy, they are the single best place to play fantasy football best ball this summer. If you don't know what best ball is, it's the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft. That's it. You do your 18-round draft. There's no in-season management, so you don't have to set your lineup. There's no trades, and there's no waiver wire. At the end of every single week, Underdog automatically sets your lineup with the highest scoring players. You then advance to the playoffs and potentially the championship, where you can win some solid money. If you want to join the biggest best ball contest ever, which is on your screen right now, Best Ball Mania 4, $25 to enter, 150 max entries, $3 million to first place, $15 million in total prizes. Now you might be thinking, Nick, this sounds awesome, but I don't want to invest $25 when I'm new. I get that. They also have smaller contests, the Chihuahua but Superflex, a Superflex draft, $4 to enter, 25 max entries, 250K in total prizes, 25K to first place. If you are a new user, this sounds fun. You want to do it. All you gotta do is click on the link in the video description, open up the app if you're on your phone, or go on the website if you're on your computer. So you click on the link, or you type in promo code Notorious, and you'll get a first match deposit bonus up to $100. So you deposit 50, you get an additional 50, 25, an additional 25, 100, an additional 100. If you have any questions about it, ask me down below in the comment section. So back on into things here. The number 3 wide receiver that I think has top 10 upside coming after the 4th round is going to be Treylon Burks of the Tennessee Titans, underdog ADP, wide receiver 36 at pick 69.1. Very nice. Wide receiver 79.5 PPR in his rookie season. Wide receiver 61.5 PPR points per game. He played in only 11 games last year, and he only started in 6 of them. 54 targets, 4.9 per game, number 77. 33 receptions, 3 per game, number 81. 444 receiving yards, 40.4 per game, number 74. And 2 total touchdowns, 76th. Last year, the Tennessee Titans went ass up, right? They went from a team that most people would say in that division, because it's incredibly soft. Let's be honest. Soft division, besides the Jags, right? They should be contenders there, right? Tannehill isn't the best. He's average. They'll be fine. They got a solid offensive line. They have Derrick fucking Henry, who can just send someone to Middle Earth with a stiff arm. They'll be just fine, right? They lose A.J. Brown, but they'll be fine, right? And reminder, the pick that they got back from A.J. Brown, because they didn't want to give him that fat contract, was Treylon Burks, who they drafted. So, that obviously doesn't work, right? Last year, even though they're kind of like this consensus winner of their division, they don't win the division. They look bad. Again, everything goes wrong. They go ass up. Tannehill gets hurt. Then you see Malik Willis. That doesn't work. Malik Willis is terrible. Then they go with Josh Dobbs, right? Everything goes wrong for Burks. He's also hurt. So now we enter the season. Obviously, Tannehill's going to be the starter, and if things don't work out with him, they'll go to Mayo Man Will Levis. Obviously not the best quarterback situation, but not the worst either, right? It's not like they have someone who has no idea what he's doing out there. So I'd be pretty fine with the quarterback situation ultimately. And the competition around Burks is just so low that there is just a 0% chance, unless he gets hurt, knock on wood, right? Unless he gets hurt, there's a 0% chance that someone surpasses him as the wide receiver 1 on the team. There is just no way anyone is confident in Nick Westbrook, Ikain, Kyle Phillips, Chris Moore surpassing him as the wide receiver 1. Now, there is one player that is actual competition for him, but that's a tight end, Chig Onwuekwu. I like Chig a lot as a tight end, kind of coming off the board from tight end 10 through 14 in a lot of the drafts I've done. He's an interesting player, obviously not a wide receiver. Sure, he's going to take targets away from Burks, but look, like Nick Westbrook, Ikain, flash in the pan, has like some decent games, but we all know deep down that's not the wide receiver 1 on the Titans. We've seen Kyle Phillips, he's all right. Chris Moore, journeyman, right? None of these guys can hold the jockstrap of Treylon Burks. I think if Treylon Burks is able to stay healthy for all of 2023, I think this is a Titans team that isn't really underrated, because I don't think they're going to win a lot of games, but I do think as a whole, offensively, they are a little bit underrated. I think Treylon Burks is a good enough player to finish inside the top 10 at the wide receiver position, and where he is going, I get it because he was hurt last year and didn't look that great, but you can really, there's so many excuses. Like, again, a laundry list of excuses. The quarterbacks all get, like, Tannehill gets hurt, and then you have Malik Willis and Josh Dobbs. Obviously, that's not going to work. He gets hurt coming into the season, so he only starts 6 games, only gets 11 goes at it, right? There's a lot of excuses you can make. I think Treylon Burks, the player, is good enough to excel and potentially finish top 10 in fantasy football at wide receiver. Moving now to player number 4, we got my guy. I want a bad bitch, Jordan Addison Ray of the Minnesota Vikings, underdog ADP, wide receiver 37 at pick 71.6. With Adam Thielen gone in Carolina, I believe that Addison is the clear wide receiver number 2 in this offense. Now, I know KJ Osborne has had a couple of good games, right? You may have even picked him up in fantasy in the past because he has that big boom game, and you're like, all right, you know what? Maybe this guy's legit, and then he comes out the next game and shits the bed, right? KJ Osborne is a fine wide receiver 3 in the NFL. He's got the speed. He's a fun guy to watch, but he's no Jordan Addison. Addison was drafted in the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft. He's not the biggest guy around. He's not 6'5". He's not even 6 feet. He's 5'11", 173 pounds. But I believe with how pass heavy this Vikings offense looked in 2022 compared to prior seasons, they were a team that in the past looked to establish the run with Dalvin Cook. They looked to be a little bit more pass heavy last season, which was a huge positive towards Justin Jefferson exploding for fantasy football. And I think they're going to continue on that same path. Obviously, Dalvin Cook is gone. We still don't know what team he is going to be on, but now they go to Alexander Mattison. So I think this is going to be a team that likes to throw the ball a lot. This defense is still really bad. This is a team that I talked about last year as frauds. Their defense was bad. They were just somehow winning a lot of these games. That seems like, they probably should lose that one, like against the Bills. Probably shouldn't have won that game, but they win that game, right? There was a bunch of those last season. There was a game where they came back from down roughly 7,000 points against the Indianapolis Colts, if you remember that one. But hey, again, while I say the Vikings were frauds last year, it's because their defense was bad. This defense is still really bad. They're going to be in these firefight games, these rock'em sock'em robot matches where the teams are just beating the shit out of each other. They're just scoring a bunch of points, and they're in a dome, which is even better for that, especially later on in the season, because it's cold in Minnesota, as Lil Yachty says in that song, "Cold like Minnesota." So we all know it could snow there, but they've got a dome. Again, 5'11", 173 pounds. I think this Vikings offense is the perfect landing spot for him. Last year at USC 2022, he was a 20-year-old playing in 11 games, 49 receptions on 84 targets, 875 receiving yards, 14.8 per game, yards per reception. Sorry, not yards per game. Obviously, that would be extremely low. 14.8 yards per reception, 8 receiving touchdowns, 16.3% target share, 70.2% catch rate. Jordan Addison is the wide receiver 2 behind Justin Jefferson. And while Justin Jefferson is going to command a ton of targets, that's actually a positive for Jordan Addison, because Jordan Addison, first round draft pick, high draft capital, won't have to deal with the number 1 corner. Justin Jefferson might be double covered in situations where Jordan Addison will be butt naked wide open. Jordan Addison, again, I understand people don't like Kirk Cousins, the new nightmare. I don't even like Kirk Cousins that much, but he's not garbage. People like to make fun of him. I do too. I love it. It's funny to make fun of him. It's hilarious. But he's not that bad, right? He's good enough. And Jordan Addison looks to, in his rookie year, make a stamp in the league. And I know what some people might be thinking. Nick, how? He's the wide receiver 2 on the Vikings. How does he have top 10 upside? We've seen it in the past. The 1A, the 1B, these wide receivers that are so elite, too, are able to demolish in fantasy football. Right now, we have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek as consensus Underdog Fantasy ADP, both top 12 in the rankings. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, top 16 in the rankings, right? So it's entirely possible that Addison, with the skill, with the offense throwing the ball so much, with the defense being really bad, Jordan Addison has that upside to be a top 10 guy. Final guy here, and I know some people are going to click off once I say this guy's name, and I get that at this point, the ship might have sailed, right, on this guy, but I still love him deep down. I think he's still got a little bit of spark. Michael Thomas of the New Orleans Saints. People are going to be throwing fucking tomatoes at the screen. New Orleans Saints, underdog ADP, wide receiver 47 at pick 92.8. In a lot of redraft mocks, he goes much later than that. He's basically just one of those, if you draft a couple wide receivers early, right, if you're confident in your wide receiver core, you might as well draft Michael Thomas and just say, you know what? We know how good Michael Thomas is when healthy. This is a guy that could easily be a top 10 wide receiver. He was wide receiver 9 in half PPR points per game last season. He played in 3 games with 3 starts and then missed the final 14 games. So he played game 1, 2, and 3, part of game 3, and then missed the final 14 games with a dislocated toe. 22 targets, 7.3 per game. Nice. 5.3 receptions per game, 16th, 171 receiving yards, and 3 total touchdowns. He didn't qualify for any of the efficiency stats that I like to talk about because he only played in 3 games. 2 out of the 3 games he played, he was top 18 at the wide receiver position. Michael Thomas was on the field during the OTAs and states that he believes he will be ready for training camp, and he believes even further that he will be full speed ahead on day 1. on day one. And I think if we get to training camp, which is in July, typically late July, and Michael Thomas shows up there and he doesn't look hurt and you see him running, his ADP is going to move faster than my cock moves in the morning. You know what I'm saying, right? People are going to scramble for Michael Thomas. Because again, I get, oh, Nick, he's getting a little bit older. Sure, he's getting a little bit older. But this is a guy that for the first 4 seasons of his NFL career was a top 8 wide receiver in points per game. Now I know, 2020 to 2022, he didn't do shit. He didn't do much, right? But what I will tell you is if this guy is able to play a bunch of games, I know, that's a big but. It's a big if, right? Who knows if he's going to be able to. But what I do know is at pick 92, I'm not playing it super safe, right? In the first couple rounds, I say this all the time, I like to wrap a metaphorical rubber over my roster, right? Keep it safe. Wrap the Trojan over the team. Shout out Jordan Addison, USC Trojan. Keep it safe. But as you get deeper in the draft, you don't win your league drafting the safest wide receiver at pick 92. Most of the time you don't. You draft late these high upside players, these moonshots. Michael Thomas, glaringly, it's very clear when you're scrolling through players down there. It's like, wow, Michael Thomas. Now I know, Nick, he's been hurt for the last 3 years, sure. But if he's able to play, even if he plays 10 games, you might get 10 usable weeks out of him. He is really that good. And again, last year, when he played at the beginning of the season, he looked really good. Chris Olave's there, sure. But I really think Michael Thomas still has just enough juice left in him. Just enough juice left in him to potentially have a great year in 2023. I know I don't love Derek Carr, I'm going to be honest, but if you talked yourself into Michael Thomas last year, you talked yourself into Michael Thomas with Jameis Winston, so you should be just fine with it with Derek Carr, right? So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below as well as hitting that like button. Again, make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy, link in the video description for that first match deposit bonus up to $100. You deposit 100, you get an additional 150, additional 50, 25, an additional 25. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great guys' day, and as always, good boy.